My name is Riley. I'm 32 years old, and I work in contract administration for a construction firm. My job is simple in theory, but brutal in practice. I take promises people make casually and turn them into language that actually holds up when things fall apart. I have learned how easily good intentions collapse when they aren't protected. That lesson didn't come from work. It came from my family. When I was 19, my father was diagnosed with early onset Parkinson's. It didn't break him overnight, it changed him slowly, piece by piece. My mother stepped in without hesitation. She didn't complain, didn't ask for help, didn't even pause her own life. She simply adjusted everything around him, like it was the most natural thing in the world. For over a decade, she managed every detail: medications, appointments, research, routines. And my father, even as things got harder, he never asked anyone for anything. Not once. That's why I decided to give them something they would never ask for. I started saving early, not aggressively, just consistently, year after year. Then, 2 years ago, I found a small piece of land by a quiet lake about 90 minutes outside the city. It wasn't much to look at, just an old structure that would have been demolished by most buyers. But the location was perfect. Still water, tall trees, silence. I stood there and pictured my father sitting by the water, watching the light shift across the surface, completely at peace. That was enough. I bought the land and designed everything myself. One level, no steps inside, wide doorways, subtle accessibility features that didn't feel clinical, a wraparound porch so he could follow the sun without effort. Every detail had a purpose. I handled permits, hired a contractor I trusted, oversaw the build, and financed the entire project, about $310,000 in total. I even prepaid property taxes years in advance. And I didn't tell my sister. Not because I wanted to exclude her, but because I knew better. Vanessa had a way of showing up just enough to claim involvement without actually carrying anything. And her husband, Craig, he saw opportunity in everything. I didn't want opinions. I didn't want interference. I wanted this to be clean, so I worked quietly. And when it was finally finished, I placed the property into an irrevocable trust, ensuring it would belong to my parents, protected, untouchable, and secure. Then I planned the surprise. I told my parents I was taking them out for their 40th anniversary. Nothing unusual, just dinner. Instead, I drove them out of the city, through winding roads and fading autumn light, until we reached the gravel path leading to the lake. They didn't recognize it. When I stopped the car and pointed toward the small house glowing softly through the trees, they both went quiet. My father turned toward me slowly, like he needed a second to understand what he was seeing. My mother covered her mouth, her eyes already filling with tears. "Is this real?" she asked. "It's yours," I said. "Both of you. It's protected. No one can take it. No one can sell it." For a moment, neither of them moved. Then my father stepped out of the car. He walked up to the porch without his cane and rested his hand on the railing. He stood there for a long time, just looking at the water. "I thought we missed something like this," he said quietly. "I thought that chance was gone." We stayed the entire weekend. We ate simple food on the porch, watched the sunset paint the lake in gold. My mother kept opening drawers and cabinets like she couldn't believe they were real. My father tested the layout, the small details designed just for him. Everything felt right. For the first time in years, I felt like I had done something complete, something that didn't need fixing later. On Sunday, I drove back to the city, and for a few days, everything stayed peaceful, until Vanessa found out. My mother mentioned the house during a phone call. She was too happy to keep it quiet. Vanessa immediately asked for the address. That same evening, my mom called me, her voice careful. She wants to visit this weekend, she said, with Craig and the boys. I told her it was her home now, her decision, but something felt off. I ignored it. I had deadlines, work issues, things I couldn't step away from, and I convinced myself it was just a visit. I told myself not everything needed to turn into a problem. 3 days later, my father sent me a message, "Please come now," and I knew I had made a mistake. I drove up immediately. The moment I turned into the driveway, I knew something had shifted. Vanessa's car was there. So was Craig's truck, and he was standing on the dock, pacing, counting steps, taking photos like he was surveying a property he planned to flip. Inside, the atmosphere felt tight. My father sat at the table, tense. My mother hovered nearby, clearly uncomfortable. Vanessa stood in the living room, rearranging things like she belonged there. She smiled when she saw me. Finally, she said, "We've been trying to reach you." I didn't return the smile. "What's going on?" She folded her arms slightly, adopting that calm, reasonable tone she always used when she'd already decided the outcome. "We think there should be a conversation," she said. "Craig has some ideas about how to make this place work for everyone." "Work how?" Craig walked in just then, dropping a printed sheet onto the table. "Rental projections," he said casually. "This place could easily bring in serious money during peak season. You're sitting on an asset." I stared at him. "It's not an asset," I said. "It's their home." He leaned back, unfazed. "It's empty most of the week. That's wasted income." My father spoke then, his voice controlled but firm. "I never agreed to this." Vanessa waved it off lightly. "You're just being protective," she said. But Craig ran the numbers. That was enough. I went to my car and grabbed my briefcase. Inside were documents. Everything organized, everything prepared, not because I expected this moment, but because I never leave anything unprotected. I placed the first document on the table. "The property is held in an irrevocable trust," I said. "My parents have full lifetime rights to use it. No rentals, no commercial use." Craig smirked slightly. "That can be challenged." I placed the second document down, a legal opinion confirming it. "Can't." Silence. Then I showed him the listing, a draft rental ad he had already created, using photos he had just taken. "That listing has already been reported," I said. "It will be removed within 24 hours. His expression changed, and I wasn't finished. I laid out everything. The trust documents, the legal protections, the local regulations that made short-term rentals illegal without permits, and finally, the cease and desist notice. Any further attempts to use this property for profit," I said, "will be treated as legal interference." Craig's confidence cracked. "This is insane," he said. "We're family. You're guests," I replied, "and you've overstayed." Vanessa looked at me like I had crossed a line. "You're doing this for control," she said. I shook my head. "I did this because they needed a place to breathe," I said. "Not a business plan." The argument didn't end cleanly. Craig made loud phone calls outside. Vanessa locked herself in the bathroom for a while. Their kids sat on the porch, confused. Eventually, they left, and the house felt like itself again. For a while. Then the online posts started. Vague accusations, subtle blame, enough for people to connect the dots. I responded once with a formal email, warning of defamation and legal consequences. Everything stopped within 2 days. Then, 2 weeks later, a stranger showed up at the house claiming he had a rental booking. Craig again. This time, I involved local authorities. The man left before they arrived. After that, I upgraded the locks, installed a keypad, reinforced the security system, because I understood something clearly now. This wasn't about misunderstanding. It was about entitlement. A month later, I drove up again, this time with no emergency. Just groceries and coffee. My mother was reading on the porch. My father was at the dock, watching a pair of birds argue and then settle beside each other like nothing had happened. "Sit," he said. "Watch this." We sat there for a long time, quiet, peaceful, undisturbed. And that's when it fully settled in for me. For years, I believed that love meant carrying everything, fixing everything, absorbing whatever others didn't handle. I thought drawing boundaries meant breaking something. Now I understand. The opposite is true. You can love people and still say no. You can protect something and still care deeply. You can want your family whole and still refuse to let them take what isn't theirs. Vanessa hasn't called. Craig sent one email asking to move forward. I didn't respond because sometimes moving forward doesn't mean reopening doors. Sometimes it means standing where you are and not letting anything push you back. That house wasn't built to prove anything. It was built to give my parents a life they deserved, and protecting it, that's part of the gift too. After everything settled, what surprised me most wasn't the conflict. It was the silence. No calls, no sudden apologies, no attempts to explain things away in softer language. Vanessa disappeared into that quiet distance people create when they don't want to face what they've done but also don't want to admit they were wrong. For a while, I kept expecting something. A message, a conversation. Even anger would have made more sense than nothing. But nothing came. My parents didn't bring her up much either. Not directly. My mother would occasionally pause mid-sentence, like she was about to mention something, then redirect herself. My father didn't mention her at all, but I could tell they were both thinking about it. Loss doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's just an empty space where something used to be expected. One evening, while we were sitting on the porch watching the lake go still under the fading light, my mother finally said it. "I don't understand how it became this," she said. Quietly. She wasn't asking me to explain it. She was trying to understand how something that started as love family could twist into something that felt transactional. I didn't answer right away because the truth wasn't simple. It didn't happen all at once. I said finally. It happened in pieces. Small ones. The kind you don't notice until they stack up. She nodded slowly. "I think I kept giving her the benefit of the doubt," she said, "even when I shouldn't have." "That's what you do when you love someone," I said. She smiled a little at that, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. My father, who had been quiet, spoke without turning toward us. "I spent years trying not to ask for too much," he said, "trying to be easy to care for." He paused, and now I realize I never asked for what I actually needed. That stayed with me, because it wasn't just about the house. It was about permission. Permission to take up space. To have something that belonged to you without explanation or negotiation. And maybe, in a strange way, that's what this entire situation had forced into the open. Not just what we built, but what we were finally willing to protect. About 2 months later, Vanessa finally reached out. Not with a call. With a message. Short, careful, neutral. "Can we talk?" I stared at it longer than I expected to. Not because I didn't know what I felt, but because I knew exactly what that conversation would try to do. It wouldn't be about the house. It would be about smoothing things over without actually addressing what happened. I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I drove up to the cottage that weekend. My parents were there, as usual. My mother in the kitchen. My father out near the dock. Everything felt steady again. Grounded. I told them about the message that evening. My mother's first instinct was immediate. "You should talk to her," she said. "She's still your sister. My father didn't say anything right away. Then he looked at me and asked one simple question. What do you want from that conversation? It caught me off guard because I hadn't thought about it that way. I had been thinking about obligation, about expectation, about what I should do, not what I actually wanted. I don't want to pretend nothing happened, I said after a moment, and I don't want to argue about it again. Either. He nodded. Then, don't do either of those things. It sounded simple, but it wasn't, because setting a boundary in theory is one thing. Holding it in a real conversation is something else entirely. That night, I replied, not long, not emotional. We can talk, but I'm not revisiting the decision about the house, and I'm not interested in debating what already happened. She responded quickly, that's not what I want. I didn't fully believe that, but I agreed to meet. We chose a neutral place, a cafe halfway between the city and the lake. When I walked in, she was already there, and for a moment, it felt like nothing had changed. Same posture, same expression, same version of her I had known my entire life. But I knew better now, because this time, I wasn't walking into the conversation unprepared, and I wasn't walking in willing to bend. The conversation started the way I expected. Careful, measured, surface, level, Vanessa stirred her coffee even when she wasn't drinking it, like she needed something to do with her hands. I think things got out of control, she said. That's one way to describe it, I replied. She sighed slightly. Craig can be intense, she said. He was trying to help. I didn't interrupt. I let the silence sit there long enough that she had to fill it. I didn't think it would go that far, she added. That's the problem, I said. You didn't think it through. Her expression tightened. I wasn't trying to take anything from Mom and Dad, but you were willing to benefit from it, I said, without asking, without understanding what it was meant to be. That landed. She looked down at the table for a moment. I didn't realize how serious it was, she said. I leaned back slightly. That house exists because they needed something stable, I said. Something that wasn't going to change depending on who had an idea or an opportunity. She nodded slowly. I see that now. Maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. But what mattered wasn't whether she fully understood. It was whether anything would actually be different going forward. I'm not cutting you out, I said. You can still be part of their lives. You can visit. You can be there. She looked up. But not like before, she said. No, I said. Not like before, because before meant access without limits. Before meant assumptions. Before meant lines that didn't exist. And now they did. We sat there for a while longer. The conversation didn't fix everything. It didn't restore what used to be there, but it did something more realistic. It reset expectations. As we stood up to leave, she hesitated for a second. I am sorry, she said. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't complete. But it was something. And sometimes something is enough to move forward as long as you don't give up the ground you fought to hold.